Todd, welcome back to the podcast, man.
Jimmy, thank you so much. It's so good to be here with you today.
Yeah, you were one of my first episodes. I've only had a handful of guests back on the show, to be honest, and so always good to, we've, obviously been following each other ever since, and you're over 375 episodes on your podcast now.
Yeah, actually, we just hit 385.
That's pretty cool, man. How do you decide who you put on your podcast? It seems very random to me.
Yeah, it is actually, when I first started doing the podcast, it was like 7 years ago. I thought I have clients who have overcome crazy addiction stories. Like you listen to, you're like, wow. And that's what got me intrigued. Like, I want to maybe do a podcast and share these amazing stories. So initially I started off, just wanted to share stories about overcoming addiction. But then I realized as I was doing this, like, everyone has a story. And it just started to morph. And where I really kind of hit my stride was episode 100. I had Paul Cardall. He's a award-winning pianist, Grammy award-winning. He's got 25 million active listeners that follow him every month. It's ridiculous. And just through a connection, got him on. He flew from Nashville to be on my show. So in my head, I'm thinking, holy shit, right? This is going to be amazing. Anyway, so he comes on. Episode 100 was like when I kind of hit the stride, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And that's when I was like, okay, you know what? There's some teeth to this. And so then I've just been brave enough, kind of like you, dude. I try to follow your coattails. Like, you ain't afraid to do anything. And so I'm like people will ask, how did you get that person on your show? I just asked. I've been bold in asking people, hey, I'd love to have you on my show, and I'd love you to come share your story. And then I've just got some good momentum from there. And as you know, word of mouth, people are like, oh man, I love this podcast. You should listen to it. And so it just kind of...
Well, one of the things I like about the field that we get to play in, right? A lot of people, you can get famous for doing a TV show or being an athlete, which is cool.
Yeah.
But when people stop me, so I got stopped twice in the airport yesterday, and one dude had my book on him. He asked me to sign it for him and to personalize it to him. Yeah. And then the other dude had heard me speak a couple times, and he started telling me for about 5 minutes about how it helped him with his life. And so it's different. It's not like you're being recognized because of just this skill that you have.
Yeah.
It's like it's changing people's lives.
Yeah.
And your podcast, I've listened to a number of them. I enjoy listening to it, and it changes lives. I'm sure you've had so many of these experiences too. And not only does it change the life of the people listening, but the people that get to come on and tell their story. It gives them an opportunity to feel seen and feel understood. And I think that's really the power of doing this. And it's one of the reasons why I like to be on this level of the media side, right? It's like if somebody comes up to me, it's because something I did probably affected them or somebody in their life. And that's a really special thing to me.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's one of those things where I really honestly am pinching myself right now. Like, I can't believe I'm this many episodes in. I think it's pretty rare anyone makes it past 50 episodes.
So it's less than 1 in 1,000 gets past episode 60.
Wow, that's crazy. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not saying this because I'm sitting here with you. Like, I really have followed you a lot. Love what you do. I love how confident and bold you are. But at the same time, the reasons why you do it is because you want to make a difference in people's lives. So that's kind of really what I'm trying to do, because these people's stories, like, think about it. They got something to share that could help someone, but there was never really a platform for them to do that. And now when you get comments back saying, hey, this episode saved my life. I was thinking about ending my life until I listened to this woman or this man's story. Man, it chokes me up even thinking about that. Like, are you kidding me? And that's what I was like, this is why I'm doing it, is for that reason. Because I had someone the other day go, how did you get, a successful podcast? And I said 2 things. I don't make it about me, and I post one every week. I'm consistent. Dude,
that's the 2 things. Number one is you can't care how it does.
Right.
Don't get caught up in the views. Don't get caught up in how much money you're making.
Yeah.
Just people come to me and say, I really want to do a podcast. What's your number one piece of advice? I said, you better love it.
Yeah.
Figure out a way to do it where you just love it. Because if you love doing it, you're going to keep doing it.
Right.
And it'll catch its voice. You'll figure it out. You'll find the direction it's supposed to go. If not, then it's going to feel like work. Right. And work that you're not paid for doesn't last very long.
That's so true.
And so
true.
And then the second one is the consistency. It's just constant. I haven't had, in almost 8 years now, I've never gone a week without putting out an episode.
Yeah, and that says something.
Well, and it's funny because, like, I'm headed on July 4th. I got a red eye to Africa with my high school best buddies. We're going to go climb with the gorillas in Uganda and Rwanda.
Dude,
and go
amazing.
do the Great Migration. Yeah. And then the day I get back, I'm going to my girlfriend's place in Idaho for a week with her family. in Island Park. And so I'm literally gone until the 19th. And then I have a 2-day event. My Summerfest is the 19th, 20th.
Yeah.
So I'm literally gone from July 4th to the 21st. And I started looking at my schedule. I'm like, oh, I only have one podcast banked. And so this week I set up like 9 podcasts.
Wow.
So you're one of literally like 8 or 9 people that I'm putting on the show this week, because I am that committed to making sure I could just go. Nobody's going to be like, whatever happened to that guy? Did he disappear on me? But like, people expect that consistency, and that's just, there's something to that in all areas of life. And actually, we maybe kind of pivot to this.
Sure.
I think with recovery, it's the same thing, right? Like, it's not being obsessed with what's going to happen 2 years, 5 years down the road. It's, you got to win today.
Yeah.
You got to make sure that you do that today. I mean, you obviously, that's what you do, is you help people with recovery and addiction and all those kinds of things. But I don't know, maybe speak to how you deal with addiction and help people through that, because I think the same reason why you're so successful at your podcast is probably the reason why your recovery techniques and addiction stuff has been so successful.
Yeah, no, thanks. I feel very fortunate, and I have to preface this by saying I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Like, would not be here if it wasn't for giants in my life, you being one of them, Jimmy. But I really mean that. Like, think about it. And anyone who's ever made it to any kind of success, you have to look back and go, man, this person helped me do this. This person opened this door. And so I feel very fortunate for that. So I want to make this clear that the things that I share is I've learned from some people who really know what they're doing. And I just like, oh, that's what you're doing? Because I'll never forget when Michael Jordan was asked, who could beat you one-on-one, Kobe or LeBron? And he's like, without hesitation, Kobe. And he's like, why? Well, he stole all my moves. And really, he was just mimicking someone who was great. And that's what I've been trying to do with recovery, to be completely honest. And so I think for the listeners, one of the best definitions I've ever heard of what addiction is, like the definition of addiction, is the perpetual avoidance of legitimate suffering. Because we all go through tough times, right? And in an active addiction, what we're basically doing is we're perpetually avoiding something that's really uncomfortable.
Perpetual avoidance
of legitimate suffering. So like, if I'm out doing bad things, I'm going to suffer, and it's legitimate. I mean, rightfully so, I'm doing the wrong thing. Well, addicts, what we do is we'll pop pills, we'll drink, we'll do whatever, we'll shoot up, because I'm avoiding this stuff that I'm doing because it's so uncomfortable. And I just perpetually continue to avoid. And unfortunately, some people don't make it out of that cycle. And so just understanding the definition, I mean, that's the best definition I've ever heard. And I learned that from someone that I work with. And so that, I think your listeners need to understand that that's really what it is.
So the key then is to help people lean into the feeling it.
Yep. You got to lean into the pain, lean into not only even lean in, step right down into it, because it is difficult. Let's be honest.
What does that look like? Is that having tough conversations? Is that making recompense with people that you wronged?
I love this. All of that. Yeah, you're right, Jimmy. Here's the thing. I've been doing this for 34 years, and I will sit with someone who just got out of prison. They've been shooting up. They've been, robbing, stealing, all this stuff. And they've been in and out of treatment maybe, 9, 10 times. And they're looking for something different, honestly. Yeah. Because to me, I think a lot of times the recovery model is broken. Not the people that are, therapists, they're amazing people, but the model itself, I think, is broken.
What's broken about it?
Well, one, it's you have to have insurance. Insurance will only cover 30 days. 30 days, you got a guy who's been shooting up heroin and doing criminal work for 10 years, and you're saying 30 days, that's what insurance will tell us?
It only to cover it for 30 days.
Typically. Sometimes you can get 45 days, but
it's not long enough.
It's not long enough. So that in itself, we don't get enough time to really work on with these people to get them in a safe place, if that makes sense. So that's one thing. Also, but I want to go back to that. We'll get to that.
Yeah.
When I'm sitting with that client who's hopeless, they've heard everything. They've been to 20 treatment centers. What's going to be different? And I'll say, okay, I want you to write this down. And they'll get their journal out and I'll say, write down, I am what I repeatedly do. So they write that out and I ask them, do you agree with that? And they'll go, yeah, that makes sense. Okay. So I said, here's what I want you to write down. Number 1, be honest. And then next to honest, I have them put kills bad behavior. Number 2, have integrity. And then next to integrity, I have them put nothing else matters. And then number 3, be accountable. And then next to that, I have them put suffering stops. And then the 4th thing I put help someone. Next to that, give it away. And they're writing this down and they have no idea where I'm going with this, right? This is day 1. And And they'll say, what do you think of that? And I say, and then I'll explain it to them. If you're honest with yourself, you will not relapse. And I go, do you understand that? And most of them go, I don't know if I understand that. And I said, okay, so you're a good person. To your core, you really are. In order for you to come over here and do the criminal behavior, the drug use, whatever it is, that bad behavior, you have to use a thinking error to do it. You have to justify it. You have to minimize it. And that is a lie. You are lying to yourself. But if you can catch that lie, guess what? You won't go down that path again. And I go, there's work to do there, but that's where we go with that. And then integrity obviously is doing the right thing when no one's looking. If you have integrity, nothing else matters. If you don't have it, doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. So doing the right thing when no one's over your shoulder. Number 3, this one's my favorite one. Be accountable. Take full accountability for your life. Like truly like own your shit, right? And it's like, and then I'll say, if you take accountability, your suffering will stop. Because the opposite of accountability is pointing the finger and blaming someone. Yep, play the victim. It's your fault, Jimmy, that my life sucks, right? And then I might have good reasons to blame someone. They might be amazing reasons.
It's like the worst part about playing victim is you're probably right.
Yeah.
It just doesn't serve you.
It doesn't work. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And what happens is you just continue to suffer. So in my addiction, a lot of times I was blaming my father for my alcoholism, and I could give you 10 good reasons why.
Sure.
And you'd be like, "Oh, those are great." And I'll never forget. I gotta share this. My mentor leans over the table. This was 30-something years ago. Slaps me in the face, and says, "When are you going to finally take accountability for your life?" And I wanted, your first reaction is to punch back. And I was like, and I got teary-eyed. I was like, "You're right. I keep blaming this and him and my dad and whatever else." And he goes, "You got good reasons, but you'll stay stuck. So if you take accountability, suffering stops."
I had one of the guys I was coaching, he was repeating some bad behaviors he had before the program, and he went into his whole childhood, and he was going this whole story. And I kind of took a chance on this. I haven't done this again or since, but I just kind of just yelled. I'm like, "Dude, what the hell are we talking about? Right. Shut the." I thought, like, you were 6 years old. Like, right. How long do you want to play this card? Yeah. Like, okay, play the card. How's it helping you? Like, how much longer do you want to do this? And he was like so taken back. I'm like, seriously, it's pathetic. I'm like, you tell me you have no control over your own life because of what happened when you were 6? I'm like, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard in my life. Yeah. Take some control over your life.
Yes.
And he like got it, and he's been over a year now, and he's thriving. Right? Yeah. No, he finally got it. Was the smack across the face that you got.
There it is. Yeah.
And I was kind of, again, I was like, even as I'm doing, I'm like, I hope this works. But because I learned that from Tony Robbins, though, it's like people will get so caught in their story and they'll fight so hard to keep their story.
For sure.
And it's like, you're not broken. You just need to let go of the damn story.
Yeah. And for addicts, it's a great excuse to keep relapsing.
Well, I always said it was like COVID, right? It was like everybody's excuse to be lazy.
Yep.
I'm like, you have the perfect excuse to be lazy. Yep. If you're an addict, you have the perfect reason not to actually go do hard things.
Yeah, it's right. I don't have to go to work today.
Yeah, I'm an addict, whatever. It was like okay, congrats, and your life's shit. You know what I mean? But it's very well said. And I also like when you said that, I know in my own life, I've had a couple times where I caught myself playing victim, and I'm like adamant about not being a victim. But then you go like, wait, I think I'm being a victim. And I had one where I was just like being so stubborn, and I was like holding on to this thing. I was offended at how somebody had texted me back. Yeah. And all of a sudden I was like, I'm just going to eat crow. I'm just going to like throw out the olive branch and take responsibility here. And it fixed it so fast. Wow. And I got the result that I wanted. And so when you said suffering stops, it made me think of that experience, because I could have said that I was suffering. I was hurting. It was a bad day. Sure, I was a mess. And I just finally went, I don't want to feel like this. I'm just going to be the better person here. I'm going to be the bigger person. And it was crazy, because what had happened is we later figured out a text message I sent did not go through. And so it was like I was suffering over nothing. Dang. And the other person like didn't know that I like was trying to fix the situation. And so like the whole thing was a mess. And we both just were like, oh my gosh. And it was like, but it was the second I took accountability into it, dude, quit acting like this, the suffering stopped.
That's beautiful. I love that. Thanks for sharing that. That's really cool.
It was pretty recent too. It was just a funny experience, because I was like, oh my gosh, like we cause our own suffering.
We do.
I had one other experience with that when I was in high school. I'll tell it because it's just funny, but this girl, like, I can't remember, probably stood me up on a date or whatever. I don't remember. Yeah. I got bitter about girls. I'm a sophomore in high school. And so I had this idea. This is such a perfect example, Todd. I'm like, I'm not going to talk to a single girl for a month. I'm like, I'm done talking to girls. Dude, like 10 days go by. I am miserable. I am miserable. Like, I haven't talked to anyone. They're not talking to me. No one really cares. Like, they're kind of like, don't even know that I'm doing this.
I have no idea. Yeah.
And I finally went, what am I doing? Like, why am I being like this? The second I just like said, Jimmy, like, just stop being the victim here, the suffering stopped. And like, it was good again. And they were all just as happy to talk to me as before. And it was just like, wait, I was punishing myself for, but how often do we do this? We punish ourselves and it's like, just let it go.
Yeah.
Like we're so adamant to hang on to that story that's causing us pain. It's like, no, you literally just let it go.
Yeah. I love that. I want to get to that too. I got some ideas on that, and then that last one is help someone give it away, right? Makes sense, right? So I have them write this down and I'll look at them and I said, you probably came here looking for an answer to all of your problems. And they're like, absolutely. I go, you just wrote it down. There's the answer. Be honest, have integrity, be accountable, and you go help someone. I go, if you be obsessed with those 4 principles, I'm telling you, this will change your life. You'll overcome addiction. And it almost seems like, and here's the pushback I get. Hey, are you saying it's that simple? And it really is. It's not always easy, to be honest.
Yeah, it's simple. It's not easy.
It's not easy. But it's so, there they are. It's those core principles that we learned when we were in 3rd grade. Make sure you tell the truth and do the right thing. And,
well, it's funny because it's the easiest answer, or the right answer is usually the simplest one.
Yes.
So a question I saw the other day, one of the people that I follow on Twitter that I think is brilliant said was, ask yourself a better question. Just ask yourself in any situation, what if there was an easy solution?
Yeah.
I love that idea, right? Like, wait, what if there was an easy solution? What if this doesn't need to be hard? What if it actually is that simple to just be honest, be in integrity, take accountability, and help other people?
Yeah. And when I say I think the recovery model is broken, they will never hear that anywhere else. They're gonna be told they got a disease, there's something wrong, they're powerless. Relapse is part of recovery. They'll always be in recovery, and they get fed these belief systems, and so they pick it up without them even realizing it. They buy into it, and therefore there's the vicious cycle they find themselves in. And that, to me, is what's holding so many people from truly breaking free from that perpetual avoidance of legitimate suffering.
Yeah. No, it's exactly accurate. It's my problem with politics and different, ways that politicians try to help people. They tell them, you're broken, you need us, you need our help. And it's like, no, you're not. Like the second you empower somebody, and that's what great leaders do, is they inspire you to realize that you are the answer. That
absolutely.
You absolutely are enough. Like you already have the abilities you need to fix whatever's going on.
Yeah, there's a beautiful quote by Rumi that says, you suppose you are the trouble, but you are the cure.
Yeah.
I mean, how beautiful is that? And you've been in my office where we do our podcast, and above my head, above my couch that I'm sitting on, I have the clients read out loud on day 1, the most delightful surprise in life is to suddenly recognize there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm not kidding you, Jimmy, 9 times out of 10, they start crying. And I'll say, have you ever heard anyone anywhere tell you that? They're like, never. And I go, to your core, you're good. That doesn't mean you don't have stuff to work on. Obviously you do, but to your core, you're good. The problem is you're telling yourself a different story. And that story is what's keeping you stuck. And so that's kind of how I start day 1 with my clients, is writing that stuff down, those core principles, telling them there's nothing wrong with them on day 1. I'm telling a heroin addict who just got, 2 days ago was shooting up in their arm, and they're looking at me like I'm crazy. But I'm telling you, when it clicks, because it really is, it's the most delightful surprise. It'll hit them and they go, shit, he was right. There's nothing wrong with me, man.
Yeah,
it's so beautiful.
You are enough and capable of so much more.
Absolutely.
Right? Like you're already good.
Yeah.
And it's funny, like what is the definition of like okay or good or like, it's like, no, the beauty of life is the mess. It's like the fact that you can sit here after being an addict since you were 11 years old, you got hooked on alcohol and drugs, and then all of a sudden you've spent the last 30 years helping other people recover or whatever it is, however many years. It's like, I'm sorry, but like what part of that story is not perfect? You know what I mean?
Right, I know.
And it got messy and it had to, but that's why it's like, this idea that life needs to be a certain way. One of the things I try to help my men that I coach embrace is life's a beautiful mess. There's no right way to do this. Go watch it. What's your favorite movie? Name any movie that's your favorite movie. And the main character fell into some real shit.
Right.
Every time.
Yeah.
Whether it was his fault or not, half the time it was, half the time probably wasn't. They both make good stories. Yeah. But like the beauty is working through the shit and getting on the other side of it.
Yeah. No, I love that. Yeah. So I just think, I learned these from the greats, if you will, in the therapeutic community. And without fail, these people have never heard this before. Like I really, and I can't prove this, but I really think I'm the only, life coach counselor in the world that will tell a drug addict on day one, very first session, there's nothing wrong with them. Like, think about that. Day one, nothing wrong with you. And now we're going to work on the narrative. We're going to work on you creating a different belief system about you. Because, I often share this, the most powerful force in the human psyche is the story we tell ourselves about ourselves. So that's really what at that point, after we kind of set the foundation, I really work on them changing the narrative that they have about themselves.
I say it a little bit different, but kind of the same. I say any real change has to be an identity change.
Yes.
You have to change the way that you actually believe you are.
Totally.
Like once you believe different about you,
yep,
the change happens.
Yeah.
And so I guess, how do you help people change their identity?
That's a great question. So one of the
belief
things
about themselves, I guess you could say.
I put them through this exercise, and I hope I can explain this well, and I'll do it as quickly as I can because I want to, get into, this could go on all day.
Sure.
But I'll sit them down, and I'm going to ask them a few questions. The first question I'll ask them is, give me 5 characteristics of a good person, and they'll give me 5, right? And then I'll stop there and I'll say, just so you know, you just described you. And without fail, Jimmy, I've been doing this exercise with my clients for 30 years. I never get the same 5 answers. And I look at them, I said, if I ask everyone who knows you really, really well, if you are those 5, they would say, yeah, the real person we know outside of the addiction piece, that is the person we know. And then the next question I'll ask them is, how long should it take a baby to learn to walk? And I get all kinds of answers, but the one I'm looking for is until.
Let's get back to say until they start walking.
Until they figure it out, right?
Yeah.
And then I'll say, when a baby falls down, what do? And they say, get back up. And I go, exactly. You've never heard of a baby fall down once and say, this walking isn't for me. And then they roll around the rest of their life. No, they fall down, get back up, and they do this over and over and over again. And then I'll ask them, as we're watching this baby learning to walk, what 5 characteristics does the baby possess? And, you get answers like discipline, resilient, forgiving even, the will to never give up, right? Courageous, brave, and the list goes on. We could sit here for an hour and come up with 100 of them. Mm-hmm. And then I'll look at them and I'll say, where did the babies get those characteristics? And some of them struggle with it, but eventually they get to the point, well, they were just born with them. And then I'll look at them and says, what does that mean about you then? Well, I was born with them too. And then I'll say, what's the proof?
Because you're walking.
I'm walking. Because think about it, we're born a lump of flesh and we somehow figure out how to walk. That tells us, we were born with the heart of a lion. Are you kidding me? That's amazing. We did not give up. And I had one of my clients said, well, a baby's can forgive themselves instantly. And I go, what do you mean by that? When they fall down, they don't go, I suck. I'm no good. I can't do this. They shake it off and they keep going. And then the last question I ask them, whether they believe in a higher power or not, whether it's God, universe, energy, whatever that may be, I'll say, give me 5 characteristics that describe your higher power, whatever that is for you. And they'll give me compassionate, loving, understanding, forgiving, kind, list goes on there too. And then I'll share a quick story about this guy goes up to God and he asks God a question. And he says, who am I? And God says, that's an interesting question. Why don't you tell me? And he's like, no, God, I came to you. Please tell me who I am. And he's like, no, I'm coming to you. He's like, God, no, I'm really coming to you for the answer. And God's like, no, I'm really asking you. And then they kind of go back and forth. And then God finally says, the difficulty here is you've always thought you and I were separate. And not until you understand that we're not separate, you realize I don't have your answer, but you have it. So basically the same characteristics that describe their higher power is you're just describing you again. And then I have them read off this long list that we've put together. And I'll say, when was the last time you told yourself that? And they'll say, never. And I go, but you can't argue. You may not fully believe all these characteristics that's you, but you can't argue it either. And they're like, yeah, I can't argue it. I go, that's you. There's your identity. But you have told yourself a different story. And one of the best definitions of depression, Jimmy, that I've ever is pretending to be someone you're not. So those characteristics of who they are, well, they've been over here pretending. Drug addict, junkie, criminal behavior, manipulating, cheating, whatever all that is. Well, no wonder you feel like crap, right? Once you get back in line with who you really are, that's where peace is. That's where joy is. That's where, you're going to thrive.
Well, and I think this is why, number 2, what you said was about the integrity piece. So I say in my course, it's one of our 3 pillars as well. And the reason why, it's kind of the same thing you just explained. I never thought of it as getting out of depression. I thought of it as receiving love. But when you're not being yourself, when you're not being your true identity, like whether you're wearing a mask or if you're just doing things that you know don't align with who you really are, then you don't trust the love that you're getting, because you know that they're loving a version of you that's not real, or that's not actually you. And so, you know, I think that's what causes the depression, is that you can't trust any of the love. So you're literally receiving no love anytime that you're out of integrity, not being yourself.
Ooh, that's a good way to look at it. I like that a lot.
Yeah, it kind of goes together with what you were saying.
Again, what you do is amazing. I love it, because again, I learned from that as well, to be honest with you, Jimmy. And then, so once they find out who they are, I have them you got to remind yourself on a daily basis who the hell you are, especially in those times when you're really struggling. Because and then I'll often say, okay, here's this list of characteristics that's at your core. And I'll say, where does heroin fit in with this? And they're like, it doesn't. I go, exactly. So you're going to have to go against these core characteristics for you to go back to heroin or alcohol or whatever it may be, or even any bad behavior. And now you're off kilter, and now you're going to start feeling sad and depressed, and you're going to actually even feel despair even. So it's a good check and balance. Like, get back to who the hell are you? And I think, Jimmy, for any parents that are listening to this right now, the greatest gift you could give your children is to have them answer that question, who they are, with conviction. Can you imagine going up to your 8-year-old, who are you? And they just punch you in the mouth with their response. To me, that's the greatest gift.
One of the best gifts you can give another human along those same lines is to remind people who they are.
Yeah.
Right. I can think of multiple times in my life where I had a buddy. I had one time this girl basically was cheating on me, and I caught her and the whole thing, and I was just down. Sure. And I called my buddy. I was walking on Miami Beach actually, and I was just like, dude, what do I do here? And I was just down, you know? And he goes, dude, you're Jimmy Rex. Like, he's like, just own it and go and talk to her, and then just decide what you want to do from there. But who cares, dude? Don't worry about this other thing. Like,
I love it.
And it was like, it snapped me out of my little depression so damn fast. That's you know? Yeah. And like, sometimes you just need a friend to be like, dude, you know who the hell you are? Like, let me tell you a little bit. And, you know, Ed Milet, my mentor, he always says to people, he says, let me tell you about you. And then he'll tell them something about them they know to be true. And when they hear it, it reminds them of their own greatness. And so like, if I was doing it to you, I'd be like, Todd, let me tell you about something about you. You have the biggest heart of anyone I've met. You truly care about the people that sit in front of you more than anyone else I've ever sat in front of. And you know this to be true. So when I say it, you feel it. Yeah. And like, we don't do this enough. You absolutely. You have a kindness, a softness that I literally had you come and speak to my entire group at our summer event last year. And I don't take that lightly. Like, my whole program. If the wrong guy gets up there and says the wrong thing, there's if you notice, you were the only speaker not part of the program or part of our group. Yeah. And it's because I have that trust, because I know you would never do anything that would be less than kind to my audience, right? Yeah. And so so we just don't do that enough, though. I still don't do it enough, but it's what makes him so brilliant. He does it every time I see him. He'll just tell me things. I'm like, God, that's the best comment I've gotten in 6 months. Yeah. And I know it's true, you know. He'll say something.
Well, and what you said to me is true, and thank you. You made my day.
Yeah, no, it makes you feel good, right?
And to be honest with you, speaking at your event, there really was a bucket list check off for me. Like, I'm not kidding you. Like, to be involved with what you do is truly amazing. And again, it's so cool when we're like-minded, where we're really just trying to make a difference in people's lives. And I know you're obviously so passionate about that, and I think that's why we drive together. And so, being here right now is just amazing.
Well, it's the fun part about collaborating on stuff. I mean, look, I have my strengths and my weaknesses. I'm never going to be able to relate to people with the kindness and the softness that you do. But I'm also going to be able to drive the bus pretty damn fast to get people to you, right? Or get people in the right place. Like, I can move the needle very far because of my, my own energy and animation and everything that I use to get people to move the needle too. And so when you have the right people you're working with, you can get them there, and then you can make sure that, I always say, like, you can't change anybody, but your only job is to create an atmosphere that's safe enough for them to be inspired to want to change themselves. Yeah. And you have to get people there. So my whole program is designed for people to have FOMO, because I want people there. If I can get them there, I can change them. But it's not me, it's the environment, and they're going to change themselves. But I got to get them there, and that's my one job, is to get them there and make sure that they, feel safe when they're there.
Yeah, you do a good job at that too. Yeah, the stuff you guys do, I'm always like, dang.
Yeah,
it's amazing.
The FOMO, right? That's
yeah,
what we're
right.
No,
So I think you're doing a good job.
And it's kind of fun. It's like I'm just kind of crazy too. So it's like if I can have fun doing it, then
you're a little crazy.
Yeah,
some of the stuff you guys are doing, I'm going, man, jumping off cliffs with 1,000-foot cliffs and stuff hooked to a bungee rope.
I do a lot of stuff that
like,
has the appearance of danger, but it's not actually dangerous.
Yeah.
It's like I always say, like a lot of people are going to get hurt. No one's going to get injured,
gotcha.
Unless they do something they shouldn't have done.
Right.
But
yeah.
Well, so when you have these people come to you, then you got your recovery shirt on now.
Yeah.
So somebody's listened to this and they're like, they've tried everything, right?
Yeah.
I recently had on a buddy of mine, the sober bodybuilder, Brad Jensen. I don't know if you ever interviewed him or not, but he's
I know
incredible.
who he is. Yeah, he's awesome.
11 and a half years sober now.
He's a cool dude too.
But we talked a little bit about recovery too. It's one of those subjects that I am very interested in because anybody that can get on the other side of that, there's just the roots have gone so deep on that tree that they can just affect so many people afterwards.
Absolutely. Well, I believe we can be recovered. That's what my shirt actually says, recovered, death to the disease. And if you look at what in the middle of recovered, it says over. Mm-hmm. It's over. And in the recovery world, it's taboo to say you're recovered. It really is. And I sit there and go, why? Well, think about here's where I go with. So I had my first drink at 11, opened up 10 years of addiction. I've been clean 34 years. So what the recovery world will tell me, I have to identify myself with those years that I was an addict. So I have to go, hi, I'm Todd. I'm an alcoholic. How are you, Jimmy? And it drives me nuts, right?
Yeah.
And I get what they're saying. I mean, their intentions are in the right place, but what happens is labels are cages, right? And you know this better than anyone.
Yeah.
So,
it gives you an excuse.
But here's what I'll say. Who was I before age 11? It was all those things: love, light, energy, courageous, strong, brave, tenacious, And why can't I identify? That's the true, authentic me. I got caught up in addiction. Before all the addiction, who's the true me? So that's what I identify with before this ever started. I'm not denying that it was there. I can acknowledge I used to be an addict, but I'm not today. I'll ask someone, they've been maybe clean a week and they'll be sitting on my couch in my office. I'll say, are you an addict? They're like, oh yeah. And I go, oh, did you use today? No. Did you use yesterday? No. Day before? No. Day before? No. I go, you used to be. You're not right now. And it's like mind blown. Mm-hmm. And I had a guy, he just got out of prison for 7 years. Tatted up. He looks kind of mean, softest heart in the world. And he's like, my biggest fear, Todd, is being clean. I don't know if I can do it. I go, you already are. I go, how long have you been clean now? He's like, and that simple little thing, Jimmy, his mind was blown. He's like, oh my gosh, I've been telling myself a different story. I can't do this, but you're already doing it. And he didn't connect those dots. It was hilarious, but yet beautiful at the same time. And so I really believe in my heart of hearts, doing this for this long, that people can actually be recovered. It's over. Sure. I'm not white knuckling it. People say you're going to fight this the rest of your life. No, that's total BS. I'm not saying you won't see me at the bars and things like that, but what I'm not wrestling with this.
Yeah, no, I think there's like an element where it's like, you don't have to fight it every single day. You might be a couple times a year, you might have an emotional reaction to something. Yeah. And then you get to decide like what you want to do with that. But it's not like for the rest of your life, you know, you're just
totally
not white knuckling it like you said. Brad said the same thing.
Yeah. And it's powerful when you have that type of mindset, because again, mindset's everything in my opinion. If I can stand up and say I'm recovered, relapse isn't part of recovery. I'm done. It's game over. And I often tell my clients, I have no problem with you being confident that you're done as long as you're putting in the work. The work has to back up what you're saying. If you don't have the work backing up what you're saying, that's when you get in trouble.
Yeah.
Right?
Let me ask you a question, because this has happened a few times with guys in my program, and it's one of the hardest things we've had to deal with. Somebody overcomes something, call it, maybe it's a pornography addiction, maybe it's cheating on their spouse, maybe it's alcoholism, whatever it might be. Yeah. And they're doing great. And they tell people they're recovered, they fixed it, they're over it, right? Yeah. And then they relapse. And what I've noticed a couple times that happened is that's when I almost lose them, because there's so much shame of like, oh shit, I had this figured out, and now they're, And so maybe go through a little bit of how you help people to not feel that, because what they want to do is go hide. They want to pull back. They want to like go distance themselves from the people that have been supporting them. But how do you help people in that moment when they relapse? Yeah.
So again, shame's the killer, and you know this, right? Shame is a form of victim stance. And I get it. I get it when, someone's up there maybe preaching, I got this, and then they relapse or fail.
Right.
And I'm not just here to say that you can't have relapses or fail. What I'm saying is when we tell people it's all about recovery, that let's go ahead, it's almost like you're giving the green light to relapse. But in those moments, again, it goes back to identity. Okay, you made a mistake. You screwed up, right? Who are you? Who the hell? You're Jimmy effing Rex. That's who you are. Okay, you made a mistake. Who doesn't make mistakes? Does that make you a bad person? You may feel like you're bad, but you're not, right? So I really go back to the identity. I think that's the foundation again, like you said earlier. I think
keep going back to that.
I really do. Because I'll say, does that take away all these core characteristics that make up you? And the answer is obviously, no, it doesn't take that away. But I know that you're feeling that. So I'll say it like this, and I learned this from one of the greats. I'll often say, okay, you're feeling shame right now. They say, yeah. And I go, how many more, let's measure it in cups. How many more cups of shame do you want to drink? And then you'll be okay. Should we drink 100 more? 1,000 more? How many more cups do you want to drink? And then you're going to be okay because you feel like you got to keep beating yourself up. Mm-hmm. And they look at me like, well, I don't want to drink any more cups. And I'm like, okay, then let's don't drink any more cups. And just, again, getting them to kind of see it that way, they go, oh, yeah. Okay, we can acknowledge you made a mistake. Okay, who cares at this point? Because here you are, at least you're safe. You're with someone who cares about you. Mm-hmm. And like what you do with your crew is you again remind them who the hell they are. Mm-hmm. And they needed to just hear that. So that's how I would handle that moment, honestly.
Yeah, it's so interesting because it's more often than not, people just, the less you say is almost the better. Yeah. And when the people feel loved in that state, they feel like they're still accepted. Like, I can't tell you how many times people are like, wow, you guys are reacting so much different than I thought you would.
Right.
It's like, dude, like sometimes you do need to get yelled at.
Yeah.
But even when I yelled at that guy, is the thing that my father would forget to do is like when I would get in trouble with a kid, he'd yell at me and then not talk to me for 3 days.
Right.
If I yell at you,
which is worse.
You're going to get a lot more love afterwards, right? You're going to know without a doubt that came from a loving place. And you got to check yourself as the leader or the trainer or the coach or the therapist, whatever it is. You got to make sure your ego's not in it.
For sure.
Because it can get you can dance that line where you're just wanting to power trip on somebody.
Yeah.
And you've really got to make sure wait, if I love this human in front of me, what do they need right now? What truly is what they need, know? And more often than not, it's probably love.
Yeah. Can I share a quote that I got? It's on my phone. Is that okay? Yeah. It was in the office of a good friend of mine named Dave DeWarsher. He's the executive director of the Other Side Academy. It's a 2.5-year program for people who are actually going to prison for 10 years, but they'll petition the judge and say, can you send me to the Other Side Academy? They only have to do 2.5 years there and their prison sentence is gone.
Wow. Are these usually like drug offenses and stuff? Or?
Usually it can be bigger stuff too. I mean, it could be all kinds of stuff. And it's patterned after Delancey Street. You've heard of that in California. Have you heard of Delancey Street? Anyway, it's a 2.5-year program where, again, these quote unquote criminals are facing years and years and years in prison. They'll petition the judge, can I go to Delancey Street? And Delancey Street will accept them. And same with the Other Side Academy. They get to go there.
Wow.
And it's not a lockdown facility.
More of a rehabilitation center.
They have a 96% success rate. Wow. It's insane. Yeah. But Dave's a good friend of mine. But this was in his office, and I took a picture of this. And based on what we were just talking about, I love this. It says, if you're looking for someone to co-sign your BS and sugarcoat the truth for you, then don't ask me for advice. If you're trapped in addiction, in the grip of addiction, I'm not going to baby you. I'm going to tell you that you're selfish, self-centered, ungrateful, and entitled. I'm not concerned with your feelings. I'm concerned with your life, right? You are not a victim, and if they keep babying you, they're going to bury you. Now, that's pretty harsh words, but yet that's sometimes what we need. That slap in the face. Like you said, I love what you said. Like you can come down on someone and really hit them if you need to, but then you follow up going, I'm doing this because I actually care about you. I want to see you win. And that's really what that is all about. And that's kind of their philosophy there. They are tough, but at the same time, they're not concerned so much with feelings. They're concerned with your life. We want to see you win and be victorious over all of this. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. Anyway, thanks for letting me share that.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. Well, it's funny because like growing up, I had so many different places where you're either punished or people are trying to help you and all these different things. And one thing that I've learned is whether it's an institution or a religion or a person, most of the time they're doing the best they can.
Right.
They're trying to do it the way they think is going to be the most helpful, right? For me, I know one of the things that you work with a lot of LDS people.
Right.
And we're here in Utah, so obviously part of our culture every single day.
Yeah.
One of my big issues I had with the church, one of the reasons I ultimately decided to leave, is I didn't think they handled the repentance process the way that Christ did. I did not feel that it was the same way. And it was like, to me, that was a big sticky point for so many people that I saw. It's like Christ was all about, I mean, what did he tell the lady in the streets, right? Like, go and sin no more. It was like he was so willing to love and do it that way. And whereas with the church, I feel like in the Book of Mormon musical, they kind of talk about this big, scary Mormon God.
Right. Yeah.
And that's kind of how I felt like it was. And what it did, Todd, is not that, it didn't help my behaviors, because what it did is it made me feel that shame. I felt so much shame around, and I wasn't even doing bad things. I just wanted to do things that were quote unquote inappropriate, right? And it's like I had so much shame around my thoughts and who I was and all these things. It was really hard to feel connected to God. And it wasn't until I stepped outside of that and had some experiences where I went, oh, like I actually am okay. Like God loves me how I am. And it was like, I think the church tries to teach that, but there's just so much shame around even like being able to take the sacrament, being able to go to the temple, like these things where you literally are excluded from God's presence or from being able to take in God's blessings if you are in sin, quote unquote. And so I would love to hear like your take on that, because I think that, again, part of what draws me to you is I think you do this the right way, but it does, I believe, conflict with the way the church teaches us. I don't know. I mean, you don't agree with that, but.
Yeah, I'm with you on a lot of levels of that. It's, you can't go, if you sin, you can't go to the temple, can't take the sacrament. You're taking the very things away that they actually need in those moments when they're struggling. Like, I've never really agreed with that either. And I'm not a fan of that. And there's a couple ways I look at this. And I would like to start off with, if it's okay, paraphrasing a parable that's actually in the New Testament. This is the parable of the prodigal son. And it's really short, so your listeners, just bear with me. This is so powerful to me. I have
a painting of that in my office. It's one of my favorite stories.
So prodigal means wasteful, so you could call it the wasteful son. So I'm going to just hurry and paraphrase this for your listeners and viewers. So this father has two sons. The younger of the two sons comes up to his dad and says, "Dad, give me my inheritance. I want to do things on my own, and I want to I'm ready to leave." His father says, "Absolutely, here you go. Yes, take it." And he goes to another country, and the scripture actually says he blows it with riotous living. And if we liken that to our day, he's probably drugging up, partying, drinking.
Hookers and drugs.
Exactly, buying
women,
sex.
the whole
Absolutely.
thing.
He's doing all those things, right? And then he loses all of it. It's gone. And not only does he not have money for food, there's a great famine that comes across the land. There's no food to be found. So he's desperate. He's in a really desperate situation, so he takes a job feeding pigs. And as he's dumping the slop in the trough, he's so hungry that as he's dropping in the slop in the trough, he's thinking, I'm going to eat this. I'm going to eat this. And he's getting ready to do it. And then what happens next was a sacred moment in time. He came to himself, is the way it says in the scripture. Or in other words, what am I doing?
Yeah.
What the hell? Why am I pretending to be this guy? I'm going to go back to my father. I'll just be one of his servants. They eat way better than this. So he stands up from the trough, doesn't put it in his belly, and walks towards his father. Now, his father sees him from a great distance. And no one gets this. I'll always ask, what does the father do first, right? And everyone says, he runs to him. No. The scripture says he sees his son and instantly knows he blew it. He's coming back because he's lost everything. And the first thing the father has for him is compassion. And then what does the father do? Takes off running to him, comes upon him, hugs him, kisses him on the neck, puts his best robe, his ring on his finger, and kills the fatted calf, and they throw a party. And then I'll look at that person maybe who's feeling that shame because maybe they can't go to the temple or they can't, and I'll say, that parable describes the character of the God you say you worship. So when you screwed up, guess what? First thing the Father has for you, or God, compassion. And I'm not kidding you. I mean, I'm tearing up just thinking that, like, they've never connected those dots because, again, unfortunately, there's some scriptures out there that say, you're going to hell. Right. You're damned. God can't look on sin with the least degree of allowance. And, and then again, it's really...
God will not be mocked.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And really, to be honest with you, it's like bishop roulette. Some bishops...
Oh, it really is. That's
bishops there's some bishops that get it and they have compassion and love and show that, and they really help that person not go down that road of shame. But unfortunately, there's others that, actually perpetuate that, and this poor person's just going, I am the worst individual ever. I'm never going to make it. God hates me now. Mm-hmm. So anyway, I share that a lot with a lot of my clients who are having, quote unquote, if you will, a faith crisis or a God crisis or just a connection in general. Mm-hmm. And I'll say, remember, that's the character of the God you worship. He just has compassion. Yeah. At the end of the day.
Well, when I realized that for myself, it was after I left, I just had this different relationship to God, this different experiences, and I knew that He loved me pure. Actually, the way that I learned it about myself is I had been praying to love somebody else, and I had this beautiful moment where I got to see them through God's eyes, basically. Wow. And I never felt a more overwhelming love for this person, and they were broken. They were, quote unquote, in sin and all these things, and I literally had the thought in that moment, if God can love this person like that, then He loves me like that.
Yeah.
And so even when I left the church and I didn't really I wouldn't call it a faith crisis. I was just like, I always knew that God loved me. Like it was like, that was the one thing I never doubted. And it was because of that experience, I was able to go, okay, well, if God loves me, and He kind of finds humor in me, and he's like this crazy guy, Jimmy, it just allowed me to have more self-compassion, to be able to just give myself some grace, honestly. Yeah. And I think that's one of the biggest issues that, what I've seen in my own coaching experience is the ability to give yourself grace. Yeah. To go, you know what? I did the best I could in the moment. Yeah. I screwed it up, or I didn't do so good, or whatever it is. But one of the things you said earlier is I am what I repeatedly do. Yeah. And most people punish themselves for the moment they were their worst. Yeah. It's not what they repeatedly do. It's what they did or they've done a few times or something, exactly. But it's not, this thing that is actually them.
Yeah, well said, Jimmy. Yeah. And, and I think the other part is I'll ask people this question. Okay, so you've been struggling with your higher power, God, religion, whatever it is, spirituality, whatever the struggle is. And I'll often ask this, how do you experience your higher power? And 9 times out of 10, they can't answer it. They'll be like, and a lot of times here in Utah, if you got someone who grew up LDS, they'll give you kind of like the church answers. Well, I say my prayers, I read my scriptures, and I'll say, no, how do you really experience God? And they struggle with it. And then I share this story, and I hope I can share this with you guys. It's kind of what I shared with you guys at the event about the book, The Purpose-Driven Life.
Yeah, share it. I'd love to hear the full story.
Yeah. So, there's this book called The Purpose-Driven Life written by Rick Warren. At one time, it was the best-selling book in history. It was selling 1 million copies a week.
Wow, really?
I mean, ridiculous numbers of this book. And what this book's about, for those who don't know, it's about connecting with God. It's not about going to church or being religious per se. It's more about how can you connect with God or a higher power? And I kind of like that because it's a non-threatening, if you will, approach. Yeah. And I think that's why it sold so many, because people are like, this is great. Well, that book gets in the hands of Ray Lewis, the former linebacker of the Baltimore Ravens. Now, Ray Lewis, amazing individual, NFL Hall of Famer, but early on in his life, he was a thug, and he'll admit it.
Yeah, he was there when that dude was killed, and no one knows who pulled the trigger.
Yeah,
the whole thing,
he was there for that. He was dealing drugs, doing horrible things, and going down the wrong path. Well, one of his friends who was really concerned with him had one of those tough talks that we were just talking about. He sat him down and says, dude, you're either going to die or you're going to prison. I want you to read this book. And he hands him the book. And Ray's like, what's this book about? It's about connecting with God. He's like, I ain't reading the book. And his friend's literally pleading with him, please, you're going to die, dude. You're going to prison. Please give this a chance. So Ray Lewis reluctantly takes the book, and he just starts kind of slowly reading this book. And to this day, Ray Lewis will tell the entire world this book saved his life. And so the story gets even better. He's best friends with Michael Phelps, kind of an oddball couple, but they're best friends. They're both from Baltimore, or I think,
Everett Center.
Yeah, exactly. So anyway, they're best friends. Well, a lot of people don't know when Michael Phelps is winning all those gold medals, we're thinking he's got it all. He's curled up in a hotel room in the fetal position wanting to end his life. He had that picture when he's taking a hit off that bong, right? It goes viral.
Yeah.
And then he gets a couple DUIs. He's drinking, partying it up, and people don't realize he's really hurting inside. He had issues with his father, all kinds of stuff.
Oh, he didn't take a day off for 10 years.
For 10 years. Yeah. So anyway, after the second DUI, he realizes, I need to go get help. So he's going to check himself in at the Meadows in Arizona. It's a treatment center. He was there for 45 days. Before he goes, Ray Lewis sits him down. I want you to read this book, The Purpose-Driven Life, while you're in rehab. And again, Michael Phelps said, what's this about? It's about connecting with God. He's like, I'm not reading it. And, big old tough Ray Lewis, you're reading the book. So he takes this book to rehab. About 3 weeks into it, calls up Ray. I can't believe what this book's doing to me. And to this day, Michael Phelps will tell the whole world this book saved his life. So I hear this story myself. I'm like, best-selling book of all time, 1 million copies a week, saves Ray Lewis, saves Michael Phelps. I'm like, this book must have something to it. So I go and buy the book. I've read it 3 times. But there was a line in this book that changed my life. And here's what it said. God doesn't have love. God is love. And I don't know how to explain it. You know how you read something and it just clicks? I'm like, duh. I've overcomplicated this whole thing my entire life. God is love, right? And then, so I always refer to like my granddaughter, Olivia. She's 6 years old, cute, first grade girl, amazing. Every time I see her when she walks into a family party, I just feel love. I start to tear up because 2 reasons. 1, I love her. 2, she reminds me of who I am. I'm love too. Because love, that's how love connects with love. So if you and I, Jimmy, are love, and our higher power, if we want to, or God, let's just call it God for a minute, is love. How do we connect with love? We give it away. Like we're feeling it right now, dude. We are having a God experience right now, you and I. I'm bold to say that because we're connecting because there's love. Now, a lot of people struggle with the word God. Okay, let's call it love. No one's going to argue with love. So let's just call it love. That's fine. And so I share this because I have a client I want to share with you guys how it changed his life. His name's Jake. And when I met him, he was a sophomore at Brighton High School, 6'7", 325 pounds, massive dude. And he was an All-American lineman as a sophomore. I mean, he had colleges after him. Off the field, nicest kid in the world. He would step over a spider not to kill it. I mean, he was that nice. Like he wouldn't hurt anyone.
Sure.
Well, when I met with him, he was struggling with his family's religion, smoking pot, drinking, and then thinking about ending his life. I mean, he was in rough shape. I share with him what I just shared with you about this book, Ray Lewis, Michael Phelps, and that God is love. And it blew his mind because I asked him, how do you experience God? And he was like, I have no clue. He was clueless, right? So, and I said, but I don't want to just talk to you about this. I want you to experience this. So I said, I want you to go to school tomorrow morning, 15 minutes early, at the main doors at your high school. I want you to stand there and hold the door and pay compliments to every kid that walks through. And this big 6'7", 325-pound kid, he was like, no way. He was scared to death.
Yeah.
He's like, I'm not doing that. Anyway, he eventually agrees. And I said, I won't see you for a week. So you got 5 school days. I want you to do it every day until I see you next week. So anyway, next week comes, sits down. I said, how did it go? And this kid gets emotional. He says, Todd, I witnessed a miracle this week. I said, tell me about it. He goes, that next day I was there at the door. He goes, my heart's pounding. People are walking through. I don't dare say a word. He's just looking at people. And then he says, this lone kid walking up, little freshman kid, teen, he's 6'7". He's looking down on this kid. He goes, have a good day. And the kid goes, thank you, you too. And that simple little interchange, he gave away a little bit of love. He got some love back. Or in other words, I told him to connect the dots. I just experienced God or my higher power. And then he goes, Todd, I started paying compliments to everyone. I kept connecting those dots. And to this day, he will tell you, holding the door and having that connection saved his life. So I know that goes a little away from the original question. My point is this, like you said earlier, God loves you, Jimmy. Despite whatever all this other religious stuff is, that. And I love that you say that. And that's really what I was trying to teach him. Like, you're loved, dude, period. You made mistakes. You're going to make 1 million more. You're still loved. God still has compassion. That's what that parable teaches. That's the character of the God we worship.
I love that. Well, that's, and the reason I kind of even touched on that in this podcast is I want people that are listening to experience that.
Yeah.
I want them to know that.
Yeah.
Right. Because we get caught up so much in, I say this, what changed my life is when I quit caring what people were doing and I started caring how. Changed my whole life.
Wow. I love that.
Yeah, just because I was so caught up in like, what was right and what was wrong and what we needed to be doing. And it's like, wait, like, how are you experiencing life with people? How are people feeling in your presence? How are you showing up for others? How are you changing their life for the better? I mean, you quit caring what they're doing. Yeah. You start realizing like, damn, you know what? Some of these things that I used to judge pretty hard are actually not that bad, And then other things and obviously, everything in its own time or whatever, but well, thank you for sharing that. I think it's a very valuable thing. I love what you do. And for people that want to hear more of your podcast, you have so many good episodes. Do you have a favorite 1 or 2 episodes maybe that people could start with?
Dude, I'll tell you, the one I just posted, Janicia, we're both friends with her. Holy cow, guys. I'm telling you, this will blow your mind. Her story, she's this teeny little girl, but yet one of the most powerful individuals, one of the most, when you hear her story, you almost wouldn't believe it. Like you'd be like, really? This girl went through that? But the way, what she learned through this, and that she learned that life happens for her, not to her. It's amazing. It's my 384th episode. You can go to toddinspires.com and I got a belief cast. I call it a belief cast. They can click on the link right there. They can find it there. It's on all the platforms out there that you listen to, Spotify, Apple, Google, whatever you listen your podcast on, it's there. And I would start with that one. That's going to really get you, and then you'll probably hopefully be hooked on listening to some more.
I love it. Yeah, no, she's a special person. She really is. She does photography for some of my events, and she started telling me a little bit about her story. Yeah. And I was like, hold on. Like, I had 50 dudes there, and I said, you're getting up and sharing your story. Like, she's like, wait, what? I was like, yeah, have you ever told it? She's like, no. And I said, well, today's the day.
Here you go.
Yeah, it was really beautiful. It's just, go listen to the podcast. I don't give it away, but appreciate you. Thank you so much
again. You, Jimmy.
And just appreciate what you do.
Thank you so much for having me.
You matter, man.
Love you, buddy.